Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
All right, guys, I have Kiran on the podcast again because I want to dive into why we should do BiomeFX lab testing, because we want you to be fit and healthy. I want to talk about how we can burn fat by getting some key information, gaining key insights from this lab test, as well as improve performance and longevity. So I've got the expert back on the show. I think this third time we've gone over the BiomeFX was my lab test and the new updates, but I wanted you to come on the show to dive in a little deeper. And then we're going to, of course, have to touch on immune system and microbiome today. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back at third time. And I'm so glad we get to talk about BiomeFX more, because number one, we're seeing more and more doctors using it, which means that we're getting more and more feedback on patients' first tests to the solutions that were then designed around the test, and then their second test, and then their symptomology and everything else later on, because now we've got docs that use it regularly and their first time using it was in August. So now we're getting feedback on what's happening with their patients 2, 3, 4 months later, right? So it's an exciting time. And what we're seeing is like a significant amount of improvement in how practitioners, doctors hone in on the key things that people need to be working on, because the microbiome is complex. And what we think is the right approach, because it sounds correct, could actually be completely detrimental. And I may have given this example before, but we've seen this now more often than others. Some people shouldn't be doing really high protein because of the types of microbes and the types of biochemistry that occurs in their microbiome, right? They should be doing more measured intake of protein, and they need to add in certain types of fibers and all that to support a healthier digestion of the protein. Some people shouldn't be eating a lot of foods that are high in sulfates, and there's lots of really healthy foods that are high in sulfates, right? You take things like Brussels sprouts and fish, most marine animals, lots of vegetables, and mushrooms that are all really healthy foods, but they tend to be high in sulfates. But if you have high sulfate reducing bacteria, you're going to convert that to hydrogen sulfide, which is actually really inflammatory on your large bowel. And that increases leaky gut. It increases damage to the lining, which then increases metabolic dysfunction and can actually prevent you from losing weight, disrupt your glucose metabolism, and actually stop and slow down significantly fat burn, right? So one of the key things, one of the things we really want to impress on people is the ability to burn fat for fuel is dictated by the microbiome and how your microbiome responds to food, right? And you won't know what is wrong or missing within your microbiome from the perspective of functionality that's preventing you from being able to effectively burn fat after your meals until you do something like test it, right? Or you go through and test 5, 6, 7 different types of diets over the next couple of years and see which one actually works for you, right? You throw a lot of stuff against the wall and see what sticks, right? Or you can get some insight into what is the functionality within your microbiome. So it's going to be really important for people in order to be able to make progress, to really understand what's going on in the microbiome. And this is the only test so far that looks at functionality within the microbiome that's critical.
And I think that's an important part of what I do as a health coach and being an FDN practitioner, where we say test and not guess, and looking at collecting clues from different tests as a BiomeFX and organic acids test, and if we need food sensitivity, hormone tests, and put all this information together. But also I think doing a genetic test is, strategy or DNA fit, and also looking at their genetic SNPs is a great information too, and really get this whole picture we can see to improve performance and longevity. Because I think it's so important to really, work on just doing a test as this and instead of, like you said, 2-3 years, keep trying it out. And we say that's getting
Mhm.
stuck in the cycle of trial and error. And you just waste time instead of just spending a bunch of money right now, instead of just, okay, 5 years, I still don't know what I should do.
Yeah. And waste time, and then it also becomes really discouraging to people, right? You start to feel this sense of hopelessness, like, I can never figure this out, or something's just wrong with my system. Let me give you an example on fat. Let's talk fat burn, right? Because I
Yeah.
know that's a big focus for a lot of people that you work with and that listen to what you do. And we all want to be fat burning machines. That's how we are supposed to sustain ourselves. That allows us to be lean. It allows us to have really good glucose control and sugar control within our body. It allows us to reduce inflammation throughout the body. And then it also allows us to have plenty of energy throughout the day because we don't go through these blood sugar swings and so on, right? It's good, long, sustained energy. And we all, even if you're very lean right now, have plenty of fat based energy on your system. Even if you're at like 5% body fat, which is extremely lean, right? You've got pounds and pounds of fat that you can burn for energy. And there's thousands of calories worth of energy stored there. So somebody who's been struggling with getting fat burn going, right? They have this hyperinsulinemia that happens throughout the day. There are parts of the day they feel really groggy. If they don't eat, they can't work out because they feel like the blood sugar is too low, right? And then they're having a really hard time losing weight. They have to diet in a pretty extreme way to lose weight, or they have to keep scaling their workouts. And now they're spending hours upon hours exercising, right? But between weight training and cardio and all that. So they go through all of this cycle and then they still may not get the results that they want. It becomes quite discouraging. So then the thought will be, okay, if I want to increase fat burn, I either A, have to become more restrictive on my diet, right? Or B, I have to I have to increase my volume of exercise, right? That's really the go-to. What they may never think is that the key thing for me to increase my fat burn is to eat polyphenols, right? They
Yeah.
would never think that. Like, how would they ever know that, right?
No, I didn't know
Now,
until my test.
yeah, and why would that be a critical thing? Well, because there's an organism, a keystone organism in your gut microbiome called Akkermansia muciniphila that plays a very important role in fat burning signaling within the body. In particular, things like increasing butyrate production from the food that's coming in, or sealing up the lining of the gut and reducing endotoxemia. These are all components and functions of Akkermansia that help it trigger fat burn in your body, right? And fat burning is a biochemical signaling. It's not a physical thing that you can necessarily induce. You can try to stimulate your body into fat burn, but if you don't have the right biochemical signaling to turn that on in your cells, it won't happen, right? There's something called AMP kinase that has to be turned on systemically in order to tell your cells burn fat for fuel instead of sugar. Your cells have a tendency to move towards sugar metabolism because fat metabolism is more energy costly, right? You get less ATP per gram of fat than you can from a gram of sugar with more energy consumption, right? So it's the fat burn takes longer for your cells, but it's the more sustained and sustainable source of energy for the body. And so there are control mechanisms for that. Part of that control mechanism comes from the gut, and Akkermansia plays a critical role in that. So if you're low in Akkermansia, that could be one of the critical reasons why you struggle with fat burn,
And
right?
that was my
Especially,
test we went over. We had none detected, which was amazing to me.
totally, which means it's there, but it's at such a low level we can't even pick it up in the stool sample, right?
Yeah.
And which means that it makes it so much harder for you to maintain your leanness, right? And it makes it, and as you get older and as you automatically start losing diversity, it actually means you have to work even harder in maintaining your composition. And so it makes this struggle back and forth with weight gain, and your diet has to be super restrictive and strict. And so just having increased acromantia has a huge impact on your overall body composition and how your body responds to food. And so then the solution would be to increase polyphenol intake because Akkermansia does really well consuming polyphenols, and that supports a growth in Akkermansia. So you would never know that perhaps the best solution for you versus over adding 2 more hours a week on your exercise, being more restrictive on your diet, is actually just to eat some polyphenols throughout the week. Like that's the kind of insight you can get when you look at a true functional microbiome test.
And then what would polyphenols be for people, if you want to give some examples?
Yeah, so the most the readily available kinds are colored fruits and vegetables, right? So things that have carotenoids of color in it, and especially things like berries, for example, or peppers. Even things like a sweet potato has polyphenols in it. So anything with that kind of bright, deep color will serve as a source of polyphenols. Red wine, if you can find good red wine that doesn't have a bunch of toxins in it, which there are out there, red wine can serve as a source of polyphenols. Dark chocolate can serve as a source of polyphenols. Now, and then it's opposite, right? Because when you think about it, if someone's struggling with it, they want to become even more strict with their diet, they're not going to eat a fruit, right? They're not going to eat berries, right? They're not going to eat a dark chocolate. Those are the things they're not going to do, where that may actually be the key to them. But you won't know that until you test, and you won't know that until you look at what's going on in your microbiome.
And I think that's why I wanted to do this topic at the beginning of the year, because so many people are trying new eating patterns, eating programs as keto and carnivore and what's the ketovore, and really, trying to replicate what other people are doing, get the same results, and not realizing that their microbiome, their genetics, their body is different than someone else's. That sometimes if you are not having success of losing weight, burning fat with nutrition and exercise, then we need to look a little deeper and investigate really what's actually going on inside under the hood.
Totally. And I mean, if you look at our ancestors, right, they didn't specifically exercise. They were clearly more active than we are because they had to work harder to get food and things like that. So they moved around more. They naturally had more motion and movement. But early humans stayed actually quite muscular and quite lean, right? But they didn't go and specifically lift rocks and things like that. It's because they had to build up their biceps and shoulders and so on. They just had a natural muscular composition because your gut microbiome controls your body composition in many ways. Now, our lifestyle is different, so we can't necessarily live like them. So we do need to specifically exercise. We do need to specifically add resistance into our muscles, work our muscles to failure, and so on, to give it the kind of training and stimulus that it needs. But we're forgetting the gut component of it. How the gut kept our ancestors lean, muscular, and healthy for most of their life. Their life expectancy, of course, was shorter, but nonetheless, the body composition of early humans was the way we depict fitness and health, right? And they didn't have to work at it. And so big part of it is they had the right type of gut microbiome and they didn't disrupt their microbiome. Now, what we've been doing is we can go to the gym, we can diet and all that, but we've been screwing up our microbiome since the day we're born, right? With all of the things that we're exposed to, with all the things that we do. So if we can bring back our microbiome closer to what it should look like and what it should function like, then all of the work it takes to stay lean and stay healthy and stay fit will be much less, right? That's really the key here.
A lot of it you're saying is that chronic stressors that we added in our environment as just our way of life, that's impacting our microbiome, rather than the stressors they had were probably more hermetic type of stressors that are on and off in our ancestral time, versus now we've this like constant busyness and toxins in our environment. And I was going over research on mold toxicity and how many people are showing mold toxicity and how that affects gut health, your microbiome, and just all these different things that are impacting our microbiome that we really are unaware of unless you do this type of lab test and investigate a little deeper.
Totally. And you just look at the whole concept of the flight or fight syndrome, right? We have this really important biochemical response called the flight or fight syndrome. And the reason for that is because in early humans, when they sense danger, they hear a rustling in the grass or they hear noises and things like that, they see something that looks suspicious, they had a true danger that that thing might eat them, or it may be an enemy, tribe that's coming to attack them. So it's a true, danger signal, and flight or fight would trigger, to get them out of that situation, right? So then their muscle engagement increases, heart rate increases, breathing rate increases, all of that, so they can sprint, run, fight, whatever it may be, that to get out of that situation. But then the moment they're out of that situation, all of that simmers back down. They go back into more of a parasympathetic and repair, rest and repair. In the modern age, we are predominantly in the fight or flight state, right? And even though for the most part, there's no actual danger, right? But people are in this constant elevated sympathetic flight or fight state. And that's a very unhealthy state to be in, and a lot of it is not even our fault, right? A lot of it is are the things we've been prescribed in the past, is the water that we have to drink, is the produce that we've been eating and what it's covered in, and so the off-gassing from the carpet in your home, or the glues that are in your furniture. All these kinds of things have a huge impact on your system, and it's not always because of your own personal choice, right? So we have to constantly fight to maintain a healthy functioning microbiome. And one of the best ways to really understand what areas to focus in is to do a functional microbiome test. So you get a sense of what's going on.
Yeah, I'm obviously a big believer in it. I think a lot of people struggle with losing weight, especially athletes. They exercise more, and endurance athletes, get the more is better. If I'm not doing enough because I'm not getting results. So what are the clues that we can get from the BiomeFX lab to help us figure out why we're not losing weight if people are struggling with weight losses? We talked about akkermansia as the main one, but what other things that we can collect from the entire lab? Because there's so much info in there.
Yeah, so there's a few things we can look at. So we can look at things like your Bacteroidetes to Firmicutes ratio. Bacteroidetes to Firmicutes ratio will tell you more about your metabolic process and the kinds of things that you should be eating to favor a more fat burn type of process, right? And so that gives you some direction on, okay, I need to start adding a few more of these types of foods into my diet to promote a higher growth of Bacteroidetes, which will then stimulate things like improved fat burning, better sugar control, better satiety signaling, better leptin signaling. So all of those things are controlled by microbes within those phyla. And so you get a sense of where you need to be in terms of what you should add into your diet. Other components of it is like we're looking at some of the keystone strains besides Akkermansia, like Faecalibacteria prausnitzii. Faecalium bacteria is really important because it's a very powerful short-chain fatty acid producer. Butyrate and other short-chain fatty acids are very critical compounds for metabolic health, right? Lowered butyrate is a huge issue in metabolic dysfunction. It not only leads to inflammation, leakiness in the gut, but it also completely compromises the leptin-ghrelin response to food. That's the hunger satiety hormone response. And then it compromises fat burn signaling after the meal as well, right? So that is another clue. If Faecalibacteria is low, that's another microbe that you have to work on in order to optimize your metabolic function. And then there are other things like saccharolytic fermentation versus proteolytic fermentation, right? So what kind of metabolic process does your microbiome tend to do? That'll dictate, should I be eating more or less protein? Should I be enhancing the resistant starch fiber component of my diet? What would actually favor the better metabolic outcome for me? So these are some of the things. And then there are pathogens as well. And it's rare that pathogens are the ones interfering with your metabolic process, but in some cases it can be. It can be pathogens that are causing anxiety behavior and stress behavior in you. And of course, when you are stressed, it's going to increase leaky gut, and leaky gut leads to obesity, right? The American Diabetic Association has published studies showing that leaky gut is the primary insult that starts the process of type 2 diabetes formation and obesity, right? So this is the ADA, this is the American Diabetic Association. These are large research organizations that take a long time to come to new science, right?
Yeah,
And they've
huge.
published this 3-4 years ago. So it's clear. There's no doubt about it that your gut microbiome is the primary reason you struggle with weight, you struggle with fitness, you struggle with mood, and so all of those insights can be gained from the test.
And we'll get back to this later on towards the end of the podcast, but the research article I shared with you that came out this week on the microbiome and your immune system, and it's just like, okay, everything we heard years ago, all health starts in the gut, and it really makes sense that, all right, it does make a difference if you have poor bacteria diversity in your gut, your microbiome, but it's related, as you just said, insulin resistance. And what's the biggest culprit of people that are struggling with COVID is insulin resistance, obesity, and that's connected to poor immune system. So it's like, okay, I can see this all correlating together. Kind of makes sense to all of us.
Totally, yeah. I mean, when I did my very first interview on COVID back in March, right? One of the first things I started off with is that I actually predicted, if we can go back to a recording, and I think that was either with Tina Moore or somebody, can't remember who exactly it was, but I made a prediction that before the end of the year, or at least in the next 12 months, we're going to get studies that come out that show that your microbiome is going to dictate how your body responds to COVID. And one of the most important things you can do over the next year, as we look at this pathogen running through the population, is to focus on gut health, because that is going to be a big determining factor on what happens to you should you encounter the virus, right? And the reason for that is, 6 months before that, I had started lecturing quite a bit at conferences on the role of the microbiome in immune response, right? Showing, and that's because there's a number of studies that have come out over the last 2-3 years showing that the immune system actually cannot respond without the right signals from the microbiome, right? It's not that there's a compromised effect and all that. No, the immune system will cease to function when your microbiome is dismantled. And that was a big, profound thing. There was a published paper in Cell, which is one of the top tier journals, and this was a follow-up study to a couple other studies they had done, where they were able to show in no biotic mice, right? So these are mice that are raised with no microbiome. So they have all other physiological functions. They're fed, they eat and all that, but they have no microbiome. They're raised under sterile conditions. And so what they were able to show, that these mice, despite having all of the immune cells that you need, your dendritic cells, your macrophages, your T cells, your natural killer cells, when they introduce a viral pathogen into the mouse, the virus gets in, starts infecting the mouse's epithelial cells and airway cells and all that. And the immune cells literally sit by and watch. They don't respond to the presence of the virus, right? It's mind-boggling to think that the immune system watches this happening and has no idea what to do. The moment they implant a microbiome into the animal, all of a sudden the immune system goes to work. And they figured out that there are all these signalings that come from the microbiome that alerts the immune system that, hey, there's a pathogen here that you need to pay attention to and go after. Only then does the immune system actually go after it, right? And why is that? That seems like a dysfunctional system that our own immune system can't protect us without bacteria and all that giving it signals, right? The reason for that is because internally and externally, we are completely covered with microbes, right?
Yeah.
Every square millimeter of our body on the inside and outside is already covered by bacteria, viruses, protozoa, amoebas, and so on, right? And so if it's our immune system's job to protect us against infective microbes, and they are living in a sea of microbes, they would have an impossible job to understand who to attack and who not to attack, right? Because all day long, they're looking at targets, right? All day long, our immune system is surveying an area that has a 200,000 to 1 ratio. For every one immune cell that is surveying your system to try to protect you, there are 200,000 microbial cells, right? So it's a mind-boggling task for the poor immune system. The only way they can function is if the microbiota, the microbes that are in your system that are your resident microbes, are the eyes and ears for the immune system. The resident microbiota tells the immune system when it needs to respond because they know who's foreign and who's not, right? So when your resident microbiota sees a new virus coming in, who sees a new bacteria coming in, they know that that's a disruptive organism that doesn't fit in that ecosystem naturally. And then they can instruct your immune system to go after it. So it becomes extremely critical in order to be able to elicit a response to this new pathogen that's floating around, that our microbiome is healthy. And then, as I had predicted, now we have two, and I think maybe a third study coming out showing that a really strong predictor of how severe your COVID-19 case is going to be, whether you're going to be hospitalized or you're going to get killed from it, is based on what your microbiome looks like. And it's the basic tenets within your microbiome: diversity. How diverse is your microbiome? One of the keystone strains I mentioned on fat burn, Faecalibacteria prosnitzi, that's a key organism that seems to be a determining factor on how your immune system responds to COVID. Bifidobacteria, various species within bifidobacteria, critically important in determining how your immune system responds to COVID, right? So those that get hospitalized and die from this have compromised microbiomes. They also, because of that compromise, have metabolic issues and have inflammatory issues and have mood issues, right? All of those things go hand in hand. So it's no surprise, and it was no surprise certainly to me and a lot of people in our space, that the people that had the highest risk and most susceptible were people with metabolic dysfunctions, glucose issues, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and so on, because they're also the people that have compromised microbiomes.
And then I was listening to, I think it was Mike Munsley yesterday, a podcast on vitamin D in your microbiome and how that correlates together too, because your vitamin D levels do help improve your microbiome as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. Micronutrients, all micronutrients, vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin E, all of those micronutrients. And remember, those micronutrients have been here well before humans were ever here, right? We think of them as things we need and they're ours. Well, no, every microbe in the world has been making and utilizing these micronutrients for way longer than humans have existed, right? So things like magnesium, zinc, all the basic minerals, all the basic vitamins are all utilized, and many of the vitamins are also made by the microbiome. So that's part of how these micronutrients are very beneficial to us, is they feed the microbiota as well, right? So you can't, you have to pay attention to getting adequate amounts of those micronutrients. But one of the things I'd been telling people since March is that the moment COVID came around and people became really hyper aware of their immune response, right? And then you start taking high doses of vitamin C, zinc, echinacea, all of these things. Those are good and those are important. However, you cannot take enough vitamin C, enough zinc, enough echinacea to overcome a dysfunctional microbiome, right? Yeah. So the immune compromise that occurs because your microbiome is messed up cannot be overcome by supplementing with those micronutrients. You need them, but you also need to be really heavily focusing on your microbiome. If you do both, then you're in the best shape.
Well, we've always said that you can't out-supplement a bad diet. And same thing, you can't out-supplement poor microbiome, I guess, too, or you can't out-exercise a bad microbiome, same thing.
You can't. And here's the thing, what is going to be the best kind of diet or additions to your diet for you? You really don't know until you do a functional microbiome test. Right. So it all comes down to kind of understanding the functionality of your microbiome. And when you can do a test like the BiomeFX and really understand the gaps and dysfunctions within your microbiome, then you can adjust your lifestyle, your diet, your behaviors to overcome those dysfunctions so that your microbiome is now optimally healthy. Then everything else in the system will work better.
So as we always say, test and not guess what's actually going on under the hood. So Absolutely. Much information we can get from that. And another thing I keep hearing about, and I've just reading books lately a lot more, and Ben Greenfield was talking about this, is how athletes, you can get leaky gut being an athlete, and how I think there's a lot of people that exercise a lot, they say do Ironman, marathons, whatever sports, but long distance stuff, and they can get stuck thinking they're doing everything to be healthy. I'm fit. I can, I'm strong. I look good on the outside. But talk about a little bit, if you can, how that's actually causing some damage to your gut. We can create leaky gut from exercising in higher heat temperatures, I've read.
Mm-hmm. No, we do. In fact, you absolutely do create leaky gut with training and high intensity training. That's just a factor of training, and that's part of the reason why overtraining is a huge issue, and not getting adequate rest in between training is a big issue as well, right? So there's a couple of aspects to it. Number one, there was a study long ago, and you can actually look this up. It wasn't that long ago. It was probably maybe 8-9 years ago, where they showed that people who are endurance athletes, amateur endurance athletes, if you do more than 10 marathons in your lifetime, you lower your life expectancy by a measurable amount, right? So that kind of long, high stress endurance training, Ironmans and all that stuff, just weekly long runs, all of those have a huge impact on your overall health for a couple of reasons. Number one, it does create stress in your body, and that's part of the benefit, because you want that stress so that you can create adaptations to the stress, right? But the adaptations come during the rest and recovery period. And what are they doing during the rest and recovery period, right? What does their diet look like? Are they eating the right kinds of foods? Are they eating a diverse enough diet? Are they feeding the microbiome adequately? And then the other things that endurance athletes tend to consume, and I know this because I was a competitive cyclist for a long time, up to about 3 years ago. I raced with a team, and we would be putting 600 miles a week on the bike, right? That's long hours doing really stressful things to the body. And those people are the ones that got sick the most, right? Their immune system become compromised, because not only are you putting your body through this amazing amount of stress, you're also eating really shitty things, right? Like, what are you eating during that 6-7 hours of riding or running? You're eating gel packs, you're eating these weird honey things, you're eating these things that are really not that good for your gut, because all you're thinking about is sugar replacement and glycogen levels and all of that, right? So we're not eating well. And then at the end of the rides, what do people do? They go to Starbucks, and then they're like, oh, we got to refuel. So then they have a big cappuccino, and then one of those Starbucks like muffins and this and that, because you're just concerned about replenishing the sugar in the body, right? And so those are all horrific things, because not only are you creating leaky gut during the exercise, but then you're not putting in the right kind of nutrients and supplementation and all that to heal the leaky gut during the recovery phase. And you don't even provide yourself with enough recovery, right? So there are studies that show, studies in the military that show that the training that occurs during basic training actually creates significant leaky gut in soldiers for a prolonged amount of time. And then you take these soldiers and put them in really high stress combat environments, and no wonder the rate of things like depression, anxiety, suicide, post-traumatic stress, all of that is through the roof, right? Because their guts are completely messed up, so they have no capability of dealing with stress and anxiety, because a leaky, messed up gut drives more stress and anxiety, right? So it's so important for people, to do the exercise. That's fine. Put the body through stress, but then you need to come back, and you need to eat a really healthy diet, a diverse diet. You need to take the right supplementation. You need to take prebiotics, the right probiotics, because you have to focus not on replenishing sugar and glycogen. You need to focus on healing the gut and giving yourself adequate time for repair. So that kind of stuff, even though we conflate that with health, is actually not healthy, right? So one of the things that we tend to do is we equate fitness with health, right? It's not congruent. They're not one and the same. You could be extremely fit. You could be able to run a 6-minute mile, right? You could be able to do 15, 25, 30 pull-ups. You could do muscle ups, all of these amazing fitness strengths, but you could be extremely unhealthy on the inside, being set up for long-term chronic illness based on what your inside is like, right? And we're programmed. We look at the Instagram people that are all super sexy and fit and ripped and look amazing. They are not necessarily healthy, right? It's not one and the same.
Yeah, and that's why I'm trying to keep talking about this on the podcast. Is not just about training and how you're training and racing, but let's just focus on, lab testing and figure out what's going on under the hood, because so many people are doing all the right things, air quotes around that, because I know a lot of people doing keto or they're doing carnivore and they just still aren't feeling their best self. And, we got to look at performance, but longevity should be more important than how your races are, or your training is going this year. And I think it's so essential to really work on finding what's going on in your gut and improving that to work on your health.
Totally. Because, when you are doing things like racing and training extensively, those, like I mentioned, are really amazing stressors on your body, right? So they will create dysbiosis, they will create leaky gut, they will compromise your immune system. Those are facts of training, and the key here is being able to recover from the training effectively. And the only way you can really recover from the training effectively is to understand where your dysfunctions are and make sure you're paying attention to those dysfunctions, right? What is wrong with your hormone cycling in your body, right? Where are you with your micronutrient deficiencies? What does your microbiome look like? All of these kinds of things are the critical insights you need to understand, how do I really make the recovery part highly efficient and effective, right? So that's going to be critical.
And it's not just taking a bunch of supplements.
Exactly.
Because that's what people think.
Exactly. It's like taking big gobs full of supplements and every kind of thing I can think of. And, this influencer started using this powder, so that must be the way to go, and just people are just kind of going based on what they see, without really having an understanding of what their system actually needs. And the only way what you need is to have some insight and take a look and test and work with, someone like yourself that's trained and has a background in it.
Well, and that's what we do in nutritional therapy. We work on the foundations first. We work on what you're eating, digestion, blood sugar regulation, essential fatty acids, minerals, and hydration first. Yeah. And in FDN, we work on the Dress for Health Success protocol, Reed calls it, and that's working on your diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and then supplements. But it's not just supplements. I think so many people think, okay, give me what I need for this, to treating lab results. Even if, like naturopaths, I've had clients that come from working with great doctors and naturopath functional medicine, but they're still just treating the lab results. This is low, take this. I have someone that did the Dutch test and their doctor gave them all these hormones and their results are crazy. So it's really working on the person and working on their nutrition and lifestyle habits, and then supplement what you need.
Exactly. And we have to make these things easier and more efficient for people, or it becomes really difficult to stick with it, right? Because they're not getting results. They're feeling building that sense of hopelessness in there. And that's going to be really important to overcome, and knowing what you're doing and being more efficient about it, going after the areas that need the most attention. That's really the key. And that from these insights from looking at tests.
And that's what's kind of funny in a way, that we are always taking new clients as practitioners, because we fix them and then they're off on their own. It's not like, it's just 4 or 5 months and then you're good. You figured it out. We set you free, and you're able to figure out what you need to correct. So retesting, I know I have a couple lab tests still, and I was going to retest this March for my own self, but are the kits still the same as they were a year ago, or those just that? So people
they are we made a kind of a 2.0 launch in August.
Okay.
So they are where they are as of August, which was an improvement from what was available in January of last year. So yeah, the kits are they're going to be ever evolving. We're going to continue to add more parameters to it as more science comes out. So we've got a whole team that continuously looks at that. But yeah, they are where they were in August, and I can't remember. Did you do your test sometime in August or
March last year.
March? Okay,
Yeah.
so then
So,
your second test will actually provide you. Well, actually, you got an updated report.
Yep.
Did you not? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so then you've seen the updated report and the new information. Okay, so
So
yes, when you do a second test in March again, you'll have the same kind of look to the report.
So I think, doing a retest for people once they kind of saw what they're missing and what nutrition lifestyle habits I need to change and implement it into a regular habit, then do we retest like 6 months or wait a year? Or what do you think have you found most beneficial for people to get results?
Yeah, I think 3 to 6 months is a good amount of time, and it depends on how much needed to be done in terms of the microbiome. How drastic was the change that they needed to make in order to address the issues within their microbiome, right? So if it wasn't too drastic and it was just a matter of tweaking a few things in what they were eating and their supplementation, then you could probably test it in 3 months. If we were looking at bigger changes like really need to bring up diversity, really need to fix the resistome, those things take a little bit longer. So 6 months is a good amount of time to change, or to retest, to look at where you are. And then it also depends on how disciplined that individual was, right? So are they consistent with the things that they were supposed to be doing? If they were admittedly like on and off, like, oh yeah, I take that every few days when I remember, or then you don't need to spend the money on retesting, when you know that, okay, they weren't very compliant with the things that they should have been doing. But I think if they're compliant and the changes weren't big, then 3 months. If the changes were bigger than 6.
Okay. In the last couple of minutes, can you give us a short little overview of the new supplements that you guys have at Microbiome Labs that are just a great all-in-one immune
Yeah,
boosting?
the immune products are
Yeah.
the
Green
immune
ones.
products. Yeah, so those have been extremely popular when we decided to do something in the immune space, because we already have all of the gut tools, the microbiome tools to support the microbiome with reference to the immune system, right? But we've got lots and lots of doctors in our client base, and we started talking with the doctors to figure out like what are their go-to ingredients in terms of what they like to use to help support the proper immune response, especially when it's to something like a virus like this that really kind of triggers and amplifies the immune system. And so we were looking at creating something that provided the immune system with the state of what I call functional readiness, right? The immune system tends to go kind of dormant over time. And then in order to rev it up and get it ready to function, it has to be kind of stimulated with certain things. And so what we were looking at is formulating a product line that provided this steady state functional readiness to the immune system, and that's a product called MegaMune. So MegaMune, especially we are using it along with the probiotics and prebiotics and so on, provides all of the functionality that you need in order to keep your immune system kind of revved up and ready to go, right? So should you encounter something, it's going to deal with it in the most efficient and comprehensive way. And of course, your microbiome is already being addressed by the other products. Then there's a secondary product called MegaVeron, which is important to use in an acute state. So should you starts feeling symptomology of something, you picked up something and you're starting to feel the symptoms of it, that's the product you would add in at that time. That's a 14-day treatment. What that does is escalate the adaptive response of the immune system, and also increases the de-escalation process that is really important, because the way the immune kinetics work, your immune system initially responds with a massive inflammatory response to things, right? And that's what you feel. That's the body aches, the fever, the fatigue, all of that is from the massive inflammatory response that's occurring. Now, in order for the immune response to truly progress, you actually have to de-escalate that inflammatory response, and there's specific compounds that can help with that, and then push the body into the adaptive response, which is the antibody memory T cell response. That's when you have true immunity, right? And so what we want to do is create this product with supportive ingredients that help that de-escalation from that first massive inflammatory response, and then support the movement to true immunity, which is the antibody memory T cell response. So Megaviron does that really beautifully well. So Megamune helps you stay functionally ready. So your immune system is always revved up and ready to go. The surveillance capacity of this immune system increases. It also helps bring down systemic inflammatory responses, which is really important in making sure your immune system's functioning correctly, because inflammation in other parts of the body from leaky gut and other things distracts the immune response, right? Because the immune system responds to inflammation. So the whole idea is, how do we keep the gut lining and all that healthy? How do we keep healthy inflammatory response throughout the body so the immune system's ready to respond when a new virus or something comes in? So that's the Megamune part that makes you functionally ready. Then should you feel symptoms of something cold, whatever it may come on, then you throw in the Megaviron for a 14-day period to really address it. And those products have been just flying off the shelf. And I can't tell you how many responses we've already gotten, primarily from practitioners who started using it themselves, saying, oh my God, I can't believe I'm so excited I got this at the right time. I was just starting to feel something. And then they started on the Megamune, Megaviron, and it just basically knocked it out in a couple of days and they felt better. So we got so many of those testimonials back in November when we first sent it out to people. And it's been a big mover for us. So we're very excited about it.
That's great. Well, I think, I was wanting to suggest people have things on hand. So if something does happen to you, are exposed to a virus of any type or a cold or getting a flu bug, whatever, you have those things, those bottles of the supplements as you need in your cabinet, and have all those emergency products like a first aid kit ready to go. Yeah. You don't have to I have to order it and wait 5 days.
Yeah, you need your first aid for your immune system. The way I have it right now, I take that Megamune every day, along with my probiotics and prebiotics and other things of the gut system. That keeps me ready. And then I've got the Megaviron sitting there in the cabinet. Should I start to feel any sort of symptomology, I jump on it. And in fact, I was in Florida for a couple of weeks as part of an escape. We were able to rent a house there on the beach just over the holidays. And in the second week of the holidays, I started to feel, and for me, I think it was more sinus things than anything else, because we hadn't gone anywhere. We're in the house. So I was starting to feel real stuffiness in the sinus and, that kind of feverish body aching kind of feeling. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad I have the Megaviron. Threw it down. Day and a half later, felt perfectly normal and fine again, and I know my system, I know that that's kind of the start for me of like issues that will happen, lots of stuffiness, a lot of mucus, a lot of runniness in the upper respiratory tract, and I was able to stifle it immediately, which was fantastic. I was so excited that we had it on hand.
Well, good. I know you've got another interview to go on to afterwards. I was going to give you 15 minutes, but sorry, I took that away from you.
We always like to go long, but no, it's really important information. So thank you for letting me share it.
Yeah, well, I'll put all the links in the show notes. Hopefully people can order their own BiomeFX kit. They'll be shipped to their house, and you can do the lab. You can get a consultation with it. If you want more coaching, I'll put that information in there, and then your products on there you can order as well. So I think we should all have those on hand, because I know a lot of people the virus keeps spreading. I know Ben Greenfield just announced he had it, and Mike Mutzel did. So it's just, it's not a big deal if you have the right stuff on hand and your microbiome is healthy. So you're good.
We don't have to be afraid of it if we're prepared. So it's just another thing we have to deal with. But if we're prepared, we'll be fine.
Yeah, I know. We've been saying that for almost an entire year now. Isn't that sad? So, all right.
Thank you.
I'll let you go. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.